Hello, I'm Richard with EV for You, and in this episode we're going to be talking about batteries. By definition, a battery is a number of similar items, articles, or devices arranged, connected, or used together, such as an artillery battery. An electric battery is a source of electric power consisting of one or more cells with external connections for powering electrical devices. For instance, a typical car starting battery consists of 6 cells. First invented in the 18th century, batteries provide the primary source of electricity before the development of the electric generator and the electrical grids around the end of the 19th century. Successive improvements in battery technology facilitated major electrical advances from early scientific studies to the rise of the telegraph, telephones, and eventually leading to portable computers, mobile phones, electric cars, and many other electrical devices. Batteries are at the heart of an off-grid power system. They provide direct current, DC, and are available in different sizes, capacities, types, and specific uses. Batteries are rated by voltage and capacity. Capacity in regards to delivering a charge and storing a charge. Battery cells produce a potential difference between the terminals, a positive and a negative, by a chemical reaction. This potential difference is measured in volts. Remember this, the cell voltage is dictated by the cell chemistry. The first topic of discussion then will be regarding battery chemistry. The main battery chemistries we'll be discussing are dry cells, wet cells, lead acid cells, and lithium cells. Here are some examples of different cell chemistries and their voltages. Cells like AA, AAA, C, and D cells historically have been dry cells. A dry cell has a voltage of 1.5 volts per cell. Whether it's a small AAA cell or a D cell, they are all 1.5 volts. The size is relevant to the cell's capacity, but the voltage is determined by the chemistry. And we'll talk about capacity later. A lead acid cell is 2.2 volts. The starting battery in most vehicles is lead acid, and we refer to it as a 12-volt battery. And it has 6 cells, which means the actual voltage of a 12-volt battery is 13.2 volts, 6 times 2.2. Why then do they call it a 12-volt battery and not a 13-volt battery? Well, I have some ideas, but I really don't know for sure. Just know that a lead acid cell is 2.2 volts and a 12-volt battery is actually 13.2 volts. Due to the internal resistance of lead acid batteries, the measured voltage of a fully charged battery at rest will usually measure about 13 volts. If your 12-volt battery measures 12 volts, it should be charged. There are different types of lead acid batteries. The type that requires you to add distilled water on occasion is called a flooded battery. There are also AGM batteries, absorbed glass mat, and gel batteries. All three are lead acid chemistry and thus have the same voltage. AGM and gel batteries have lower internal resistance than flooded batteries and thus have a longer shelf life, higher discharge rates, and they're maintenance free. However, they have fewer life cycles and cost more. We will discuss life cycles later. Lithium-ion batteries are available in over a dozen different chemistries. Lithium-ion battery is somewhat of a generic term as it does not specify the exact chemistry used. Here are just a few of the lithium-ion battery chemistries in use. Nickel metal cobalt, NMC. Cells have a nominal voltage of 3.6 volts. I provided the definition of nominal voltage in our last video. Lithium iron manganese phosphate are cells that have a nominal voltage of 3.2 volts. This is the chemistry that was used in the early Nissan Leafs. Lithium iron phosphate, LiPo4, one of the nicknames for them, LFP, they all refer to the same lithium iron phosphate chemistry, and lithium iron phosphate cells have a nominal voltage of 3.3 volts. When it comes to lithium cells, there are a lot of different chemical combinations. So for the sake of keeping things from getting too confusing, we'll refer to lithium iron phosphate, LiPo4 or LFP cells, unless otherwise noted. The reason for this is they offer the greatest number of life cycles and are by far the safest battery chemistry available at this time. It's also the chemistry with a voltage that best matches most of the devices we'll be powering. So, types of batteries. Batteries are designed and produced for different uses. Important to note is that you need to choose the correct battery for the particular task. The four main types of batteries are the starting battery. Most people are familiar with a starting battery as they are in most automobiles. A starting battery is designed to deliver high current for a short period of time and then be recharged. Due to this usage, starting batteries are rated by cold cranking amps, whereas most other types of batteries are rated based on their storage capacity in amp hours. Quick word about amp hours. Assume a battery is rated at 120 amp hours. It could, in theory, discharge at a rate of 1 amp for 120 hours, or 120 amps for 1 hour, 2 amps for 60 hours, or 40 amps for 3 hours. Hopefully you get the picture. We'll refer to this again later in this video series. The second type of battery is called a deep cycle battery, or marine RV battery. Originally designed for a moderate discharge rate, but with the ability to deliver greater amp hours than a starting battery. Many deep cycle batteries today are a hybrid of a starting battery and deep cycle battery and labeled marine or RV batteries. And so they have the ability to deliver high current for a longer period of time. The third type is the storage battery. Storage batteries tend to be large and heavy, especially back in the lead acid days. And their name kind of sums up their purpose. They're used in the solar industry, railroads, phone companies, so forth, industries that need power storage for backup purposes or to operate in remote locations. The fourth type is the traction battery. They are primarily used for things like aerial lifts, floor cleaning machines, and other uses where high current and high capacity are necessary. This is also the proper type for use in an EV. For off-grid systems, I recommend using lithium iron phosphate batteries due to their safety, weight, size, usable capacity, life cycles, and the lifetime cost. And we're going to be talking more about batteries as we go forward, and you'll see exactly why I'm saying what I'm saying. Battery pack voltages commonly used in off-grid power applications are 12 volt, 24 volt, and 48 volt systems. But remember, the actual voltage of a fully charged 12 volt lead acid battery is 13.2 volts. And that's because there are 6 cells in the battery at 2.2 volts per cell. The operating range, or the voltage range, of a 12 volt lead acid battery is 13.2 volts fully charged to 10 volts fully discharged. Discharging below 10 volts will do irreparable damage to the battery, so don't go there. The voltage range for a 24 volt lead acid battery is 20 volts minimum voltage and 26.4 volts fully charged. And a 48 volt system has a minimum voltage of 40 volts and a fully charged voltage of 52.8. And again, that's for lead acid chemistry. So if you're going to be using lead acid batteries in your off-grid power system, those are important numbers to remember. Now, lithium iron phosphate. Their cell voltages, the individual cells, and in a 12 volt battery, there's going to be 4 cells in series, but the individual cell voltages are going to be a maximum of 3.5 volts, that's the charge to voltage, and a minimum cell voltage of 2.5 volts. And you never want to discharge a lithium iron phosphate cell below this voltage. If you do, the cell should be properly disposed of. But if you're using an off-the-shelf battery, they're going to have a BMS that protects the battery from being overcharged and over-discharged. The nominal voltage, which I mentioned before, of lithium iron phosphate cell is 3.3 volts. And the nominal voltage is what's used to calculate this cell capacity. But first, let's look at what these battery pack, or a 12 volt battery, looks like if you're using lithium iron phosphate cells. So the maximum charge to voltage will be 14 volts, and the minimum voltage is 10 volts, and the nominal voltage is 13.2. So you can see that these are fairly close to what the old lead acid was. The nominal voltage is the same as the fully charged voltage of lead acid, and the minimum voltages are identical. The lithium charges to a higher voltage than the lead acid. Earlier I mentioned that batteries are rated by voltage and capacity. So we've just discussed the voltage in regards to lead acid and lithium iron phosphate batteries. Now let's turn our attention to battery capacity. We will discuss the capacity in regards to delivering a charge as well as storing a charge. Batteries used in off-grid power systems in regards to their storage capacity are rated in amp hours. And I mentioned amp hours earlier. Amp hours are basically a rating of how much and for how long the battery can provide a charge. So remember, a 100 amp hour battery in theory can deliver 1 amp for 100 hours, or 100 amps for 1 hour, 5 amps for 20 hours, so forth. However, there's more that you need to know to understand the big picture. For instance, lead acid batteries only have 50% of their rated capacity that's usable. That means that a lead acid battery that is rated at 100 amp hours only has 50 amp hours that is usable. On the other hand, if you're using lithium iron phosphate cells, not a battery, but just the individual cells, and you make your own battery, lithium iron phosphate chemistry has 80% usable capacity. So a 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate cell would have 80 amp hours of usable capacity. However, the off-the-shelf batteries that most people are purchasing today, if you buy an off-the-shelf lithium iron phosphate battery and it says it's rated at 100 amp hours, you're going to have 100 amp hours usable, because the manufacturers aren't going to want to have to educate everybody that only 80% is usable. They just didn't worry about it with lead acid. But nowadays people are a little more critical. So what they do is they give you exactly what they write on the packaging. So if it's packaged as a 100 amp hour capacity battery, you get 100 amp hours usable with the modern lithium iron phosphate batteries. Now, something that you hear, and I read and hear this frequently, somebody will say, you know, I have a 200 amp hour battery pack, and they'll be asking something, you know, how long can I run a 120 watt, you know, bulb, or, you know, appliance of some sort? And the answer is, you don't know. There's no way for you to know how much power is in their 200 amp hour battery pack unless they give you the rest of the picture. Giving the amp hours of a battery pack is only part of the equation. You need to know both the amp hours and the voltage of the battery pack to answer a capacity related question. I think they're asking the questions and they're just assuming you know the voltage, but you don't. It could be a 12 volt system, 24 volt system, or a 48 volt system, or some other voltage even. You don't know. So they have to provide both the voltage and the amp hours in order for you to answer that type of question, a capacity related question. So why do we need to know both of those? Why do we need to know the voltage and the amp hours? Well, because, like I said, what they want to know is a power related question. And the power of a battery pack is measured in watts. So remember our definitions from the last video? A watt is the unit of electrical power. So how do we calculate watts? Well, power is calculated by multiplying the voltage times the current. In the case of battery storage capacity, it's volts times amp hours, the amp hour rating, which gives us the watt hours, or power over time. So, since we're discussing power and the relationship of volts, amps, and watts, it's a good time for me to introduce Joule's law. James Joule, from whom we get these equations, gives us the mathematical relationship between volts, current, and power, as followed. Just remember that P is power in watts, and E is volts, and I is for current. Originally, P is pretty obvious, P for power. E is for electromotive force, which is measured in volts, and I was for intensity, which is measured in amps. So the formula is easy to remember. The way I learned it when I was a kid was pi, which is P equals I times E. And so power is equal to current times voltage. And once you know that, you can figure out the mathematical equivalency here, in that voltage is equal to power divided by current, and current is equal to power divided by voltage. To calculate the capacity of our battery pack, we need to use Joule's law. The capacity of the battery pack will be determined by the power available measured in watt hours. We know that the power is equal to volts times amps, so if we have an example where we want to know the power available for a single 12-volt lithium iron phosphate battery rated at 100 amp hours, well, the power would be 100 amp hours times the nominal voltage. And the nominal voltage is 13.2 volts, which gives us 1,320 watts. Now, if you're using raw cells, remember, only 80% of that is usable, which would mean that the usable capacity would be 1,056 watt hours. But if you're using the packaged lithium iron phosphate batteries, it will be the rated capacity. So this is a good time to mention the term kilo, which is abbreviated K. And it's the Greek prefix meaning 1,000 in the metric system. This prefix multiplies a unit by 1,000. So a kilowatt hour is 1,000 watt hours. Another consideration is the charge and discharge capacities of a battery. So make sure you read all of your information provided with the battery. You do not want to charge or discharge your battery at a rate that exceeds the battery's capabilities. By checking the specifications of the cells, you'll learn such things as its maximum charge and discharge rates, operating temperature, number of life cycles, and internal resistance, etc. For lithium iron phosphate cells, the charge and discharge rates are usually given as a factor of C. For instance, the continuous discharge rate may be listed as 2C. C simply means capacity. So the discharge rate would be 2 times the capacity rating. With a 100 amp hour cell, with a continuous discharge rating of 2C, it means that the cell has a continuous discharge rate of 200 amps. The maximum discharge rate, so one is the continuous, this is maximum. The maximum discharge rate may be listed as 3C, or 300 amps, for a specified period of time, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever. Just remember the difference between watts and watt hours. Watts measure the power it takes for a device to function. Watt hours measures the energy consumed by that device over a certain period of time. Well, I hope you were able to follow this all right. We're going to be talking a lot about batteries as we go forward, as they are the heart of an off-grid power system. And so we will talk about all these things in future videos, and to make sure that you understand and are clear on all of these topics. But in our next video, just as we introduced batteries today, in our next video we're going to introduce solar panels. So I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe. Hope to see you next time.